Welcome back, YouTube. Greg here with Minnesance. I want to talk about the Jermall Charlo fight that happened this Saturday. Great fight. Great fight. So, little history on Jermall. Jermall Charlo is the older of the twin Charlo brothers. Again, Jermall Charlo is the older of the twin Charlo brothers, and Jermall Charlo fights at 160-pound weight division. The younger brother, who's just younger by a minute, they're twins again, is Jermall Charlo, and he fights at 154 pounds. What are some of the physical differences between them two? Jermall Charlo is about an inch taller than his younger brother, Jermall Charlo. Um, as far as fighting weight, he, again, since he's naturally fights at 160 pounds, he he fills out at the weight a lot more than his younger brother does. And I don't mean that just because he's at a higher weight. I mean he just packs on muscle a lot easier and a lot more manageable than the younger brother. So at 160 pounds, at 6 feet tall, he's an imposing looking fighter at that weight class. Everybody he's fought up until this fight this weekend, he was more physically imposing than those fighters, although they were actually shorter than him. This Sergiy Derevyanchenko, the guy he fought this Saturday, was another one of those short guys, but he was the first that was actually bigger than Charlo. So already, I'm coming into this fight knowing that Jermall Charlo hasn't fought very high level competition, no fault of his own, and he's fighting Derevyanchenko, who has not only fought Triple G, who I think he beat, who has not only fought Danny Jacobs, who I thought he had a close fight with, but he has the trainer of Danny Jacobs, who has been studying Jermall Charlo for years. And before he fought Danny Jacobs, he was sparring with Danny Jacobs for years. Why is Danny Jacobs significant in this conversation? Because Danny Jacobs is a 6 foot tall, slick, imposing African American fighter. And all we keep hearing about Derevyanchenko is how good he is against these fighters. They literally call him the technician. So what happened Saturday? Number one, I want to call out Jermall Charlo's choice of ring attire. All black. Perfect choice. Getting to the fight, he dominated. Jermall Charlo dominated Sergiy Derevyanchenko, the technician, the guy that was a little bit more physically imposing, the guy that had all the experience, the guys whose trainer has been watching Jermall Charlo for years, the guy who had more volume in punches, the adorable guy that took punches from Triple G and Danny Jacobs. He was dominated by Jermall Charlo. Jermall Charlo's, if you've seen him before this fight, you may have called him robotic. You may have called his punches telegraphed. You may have said his defense is flawed, that he's not that fluid, and all these things were corrected in this fight. All of them. His defense, his elusivity. I mean, his upper body movement was superb. I mean, he was picking off shots, he was slipping shots, he was rolling under punches of a 5'8" fighter. A 6 foot guy rolling underneath hooks of a 5'8" fighter, that's not something I would have expected. Okay, telegraph punches. They weren't telegraphed. He was putting variety in his jab selection or his jab output. Might be a double jab, might be a single jab, might be a jab then a feint, then a right hand, might be a feint, then two jabs, and then a feint of the right hand, then another jab. It might be a jab, left hook, left uppercut, in that order, and then the pivot with the right hand. There were several times that Charlo either seriously staggered, and hurt Sergiy Derevyanchenko. Sergiy Derevyanchenko looked like, who was that guy from Batman? I don't know if his name was Putty. His face looked like Putty, looked like mashed up hamburger meat Putty. He couldn't see out his left eye. He could barely see out of his right eye. He was cut everywhere. And after the fight, all he could do was smile and clap. That he was thankful to have lived through this traumatic experience. I mean, the fight was beautiful. Now, were there some times that Jermall Charlo had rough patches? Actually, yeah, and I'm glad he did, because we didn't see that before. The guys he had beat before this were just, they weren't on his level. And so we really didn't get to see the real Charlo until that night, until Saturday night. We finally got to see the real Jermall Charlo. And guess what? He's the best undoubtedly the best at the 160-pound weight division. So Danny Jacobs, we talked about him. He left the division. So there's only Derevyanchenko, who he dominated. There's Canelo, who jumps around all the weights, and he is not wanting any of this smoke, but he is having financial problems with DAZN. DAZN had a list, or if not a list, they had a standard of him fighting really good premium fights. Who's a premium, really good fighter? I don't know. Jermall Charlo. So he's on the horizon. If he cannot get these fights, there's Demetrius Andrade, who fights on the same station as Canelo Alvarez, who needs to fight premium fighters. And maybe Andrade gets himself in position to be a premium fighter. That might be their thinking, but he's going to lose as well. If he can't get these fights at 160, he can move up to 168. He can fight Caleb Plant. He can fight David Benavidez. And again, they're sitting Canelo Alvarez. He looked great. Jay's going to get into the other fight that night, the other twin, Jermall Charlo, who looked fantastic as well. And I'm glad they have different styles, because there's pros and cons, or there's things you can like about both. One thing is that they're never going to fight, and I'm happy about that too. But 160-pound division, 168-pound division, you are on notice. Jermall Ironman Charlo is here.